Hey, what's up, guys? I got another video for you today. Now, of course, it is another episode of Deck Daddies. Unfortunately, my previous episode that I recorded was not able to, at least at this time, it hasn't been edited. It didn't record properly, so I kind of had some, kind of sent out like the help me signal out in retro, and I had a few people kind of messing with it, but I haven't really checked in with them. But anyway, we're just going to assume that it's going to be one of the lost episodes. So we're moving on to officially, I guess this is officially episode 3, but realistically this is episode 2 of Deck Daddies here. And I have two special guests with me. We're going to start off, Jeff Sosa. Go ahead and say hi, Jeff.
Hello.
And Jeff, where are you from?
From Draper, Utah.
Right on. And then we have, of course, Joe Corsale.
Hello.
And Joe's camera, of course, not working, but
Yep.
we got him in here.
What a scrub.
Yeah.
Hey, it's not me, it's the camera. I swear.
So, Jeff, what do you do for a living?
A little bit about me. For a living, I'm actually a high school teacher, and I teach ballroom dance full-time.
Wow, in high school, huh?
Yeah,
That's quite a combination.
it is. I coach a couple competitive teams, varsity, JV, and a freshman formation teams. So my work life is very different than my home life.
Damn, yeah. Right on, man. Yeah, you're married, aren't you, Jeff?
Yeah, I just got married in November.
Dance teacher is married. Well, that's probably congratulations. Man can dance, so that's all you really need right there. Joe, what about you? What do you do, my man?
I am a supervisor at a hospital. And I'm going to college currently to get my second degree in computer network administration.
Nice.
Ooh.
Can you dance?
No.
Oh,
Jeff probably can dance way better than I can.
oh
So.
damn. Well, okay. Well, if I ever need a prom date or I need to learn for
Prom date. You gotta ask someone else. I'm taken.
yeah, I'm a little too old to go to prom and not get arrested, so. But, oh my god, I'm gonna change which light I have going here. It's really bright here for me in my face, but, okay, so anyway, as usual, the format goes, I just ask a series of questions. I did give both these guys a list of questions to kind of give them an idea of what I'll be asking them, but we're just going to kind of go from my list here that I have. So we're going to start off with, let's go through the introduction. Start off with Jeff here. I'm going to ask Jeff, where do you start when you're deck building? Do you start with like the MP, the mastery? Is there like a certain combo you look at? Like where do you usually start when you're building?
Generally, here with the Utah play group, like, we have the benefit of having a decent amount of players always show up. And so whenever we're talking about deck ideas, we always start with the MP. And it's not necessarily saying, like, we pick our MP and then choose, the best style for the MP, as much as, like, this is a character so-and-so likes to play, so we're going to let this person experiment with this MP. This is a character this person likes to play, so we're going to let them experiment. And then there's a few characters that we all try to make different decks for, and essentially fill out a list of what we have. And then we go to mastery, because you can make it work in various ways. And then after that point, like, once you have your MP and your mastery, then you can get into nittier, grittier details. But that's essentially where we start, where we're always trying to convince each other, like, what crackpot idea could we make, and what stable idea could we make?
Yeah, I feel that one. I know a lot of people that are really into jank, so. But, right on. Joe, what about you, my man? Where do you start when you deck build?
I'm a little bit mixed on how I go about deck building because most of the time I start out with MP, usually. But if I get a idea going with a certain interaction between like one or two cards or an MP and certain other cards, I might just go off of those interactions and then go outwards from it. So it kind of depends on exactly how I got started on the deck. If it was just a specific interaction between two cards or more, that I really liked and thought could work, or it was just an MP.
So you're kind of all over the place then. You just kind
Yeah.
of, it depends. All right, fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, I know some people really like to just play certain characters. Some people like to pick their favorite character from DBZ, and other people like, oh, I just love red style. So I mean, everybody's different, and sometimes we all just can't make up our minds. Alrighty, so we're gonna move on to the next question. Do you look at the numbers? So when I said you look at the numbers, do you count endurance? Do you count blocks? Is it a certain ratio of cards that you go for? Jeff, what do you say to that question?
We don't necessarily look at numbers right away as much as we look at deck archetypes first. So each mastery in our play group, we've kind of designed a base archetype or a shell. And that shell, depending, may or may not meet certain endurance numbers or things. But really, it's like, what are the combo cards needed for this mastery to work, essentially? And so, I think the easiest example would be Resolute Mastery. Like, if you're going to do Blue Resolute, there's a basic archetype in there of hey, you need a certain amount of setups. You need these 9, maybe a little less, to work. And then, obviously, your choice of blocks and these other things to get the setups out. How can you run it without Blue Lunge? It's kind of Blue Tempo. There are those key cards that make that Mastery's combo work, regardless of your MP. Now, if your MP can substitute a few in those shell, then you get a few options. But really, we take that shell, and then after that point, insert the name cards, and then we kind of look, okay, then we run our numbers. How many blocks do I have? How many non-combats do I have? And how many attacks do I have? And does that ratio match what we want? And in general, we have found, about, I would say, 8 to, and sometimes we've been crazy and even gone up to 20, but 8 to 20 of those could be blocks and non-combats. And then if you're running Dragon Balls, you maybe increase that to a 30-ish, or less than 30 range.
So you try to look at blocks as so you kind of lump blocks as kind of like non-aggressive, like the non-win con, maybe non-aggressive kind of.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
You just in terms of you're thinking, you're like, okay, if I want how many offensive cards do I want?
Yeah, and then the other half of the deck, the other 30, can be what is your game plan, assuming those two fields don't mix. Let's take a Ruthless deck, for example. Really, there aren't a ton of non-combat, so you can stock up a little bit more in blocks. So maybe there's a name card or two that don't do much, like Prideful Challenge for Majin Vegeta. You're going to throw that into that chunk, but then really you have the rest of this 30 to 40 card pool to really push your tech and then your actual damage per se, whatever that archetype may be.
Right on.
Yeah.
No, it seems like you have very much like a set layout and everything, and a very, like you said, you and your friends all have very mapped out kind of deck structures through the archetypes already, just mostly for, it seems like, playtesting.
Yeah, and Orange would be another style where it's okay, if you're running Adept, no more, we've made a rule of no more than 8 drills, because you're really trying to push physical beats. But if you're doing adaptive or other ones that have more drills, then it's okay, you can max out or go further than that number. And so we do have a rough idea from there. And so every time we build a new deck, we're always asking each other, did you remember this card? Did you remember this card? Did you remember this card? Quick, stress test. Did you fill out the shell of what that style would be?
Right on. Right on. Joe, what about you, my man? Where do you? Sorry, I gotta read. So do you look at the numbers, Joey? Is there something when you always look at a deck and you're like, man, I gotta have 3 of this. I gotta make sure I have 12 blocks, or I gotta have this many dons or something.
Typically for playing out how I make out a deck is usually, unless an MP provides some kind of block as like a name card or something like that. Typically for blocks, I usually do 6 physical and 6 energy. Usually, I usually do 6/6, unless the MP provides like a physical block or an omni block or something like that. Then I can kind of pick and choose to eliminate maybe a physical block if the meta is more energy at the time being, or the deck doesn't really care against basically energy decks, and that it was more worried about physical decks. Then after I do the whole block evaluation of the deck, is usually endurance is usually a last minute thing. If I go back through the deck once I have 60 cards and I'm pretty comfortable with the list, I'll go back through and say, hey, I only have like 12 endurance in the deck. I should probably put more endurance in the deck. So that's usually an end game last minute thing. I don't usually count endurance as I'm going through the deck. Usually I go through it at the end and run through the numbers of how much endurance I actually have. A lot of the decks that I play, I don't typically have a set thing on like setups or events or anything like that, or planning cards. I don't typically play a lot of Dragon Ball decks, so Dragon Balls are usually not a thing in my deck. Most, like 9 out of 10 times, I don't run Dragon Balls too often. The other thing that I probably change the most with building a deck is based on the mastery of drills. I really like drills. Drills are my thing. If I'm playing a deck that really allows me to like camp on a level, I'll put a lot more drills into a deck. If I'm going to be leveling a little bit more, I'm a little bit more cautious on how many drills I put in the deck. Unless I'm playing adaptive, then it doesn't really matter at that point.
That's fair. Yeah, I think I have a hard time throwing drills in anything that levels, I found, unless it's adaptive. I don't like running drills in a lot of leveling decks.
There's a couple red decks that I run a handful of drills into, but only because I think they really suit the style of the deck. And there's some decks that I run drills in, but usually if they're blue, and like I usually make them the dominance decks. That's usually the ones I usually fit a decent amount of drills in if they're blue.
Yeah. Okay, so you do definitely kind of like look for numbers then. You kind of do have certain like things set for you. Would you say that they pretty much kind of always stay? I mean, granted, I think it does change. I think we've already touched on there's kind of a follow-up to this. Is like, do you feel like it changes with archetypes and stuff? And I think it seems like both of you kind of brought in, whether it's drills or control or something, it kind of changes. Like you have your shells for everything.
Yeah, and even part of our shells include cards that have endurance. So a lot of our initial deck building in our shell has included some of those questions that people ask, where it's like, okay, well, I prefer this block over this block, and it's like, okay, well, how do you balance that? Like, Red Escape is great, but not great in the endurance department there.
Yeah, no endurance, and it's an energy block, so if you don't play against energy decks, you don't really care about it, So.
But yeah, like even in our shells, like minimum block level is 6 and 6, and then omnis can either add or be subtracted from there. And then even within our different styles, like we've in our playgroup, we've decided what ones would benefit better based on those strategies. Like personally for me, like Namekian is my style. Like I love playing Namekian, Dragon Balls for days.
Yeah.
But like I cannot see a Namekian knowledge deck or even most other Namekian decks not run buffer and not run clamp. The moment I don't see those two, that's going to be your cycling a physical, and that is just that Reju 3 is so good with the endurance on it. It's like there's some cards where if we don't see people running it and they're trying to make a certain style, we just look at them and it's like, are you crazy? Like even if you have some other block that may do better for your strategy, Like there's that shell that we think of like, hey, this is the
Yeah.
core. Don't touch that.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I've seen people running Blue Narrow Escape, for example, in blue decks that don't run as like any energy attacks. They just run it for the
Mhm.
endurance, and there's just so many of those. It's the same thing with like blue deterrence. There's any of those, especially blocks with endurance, are just it's so hard not to run them. A lot of those early set blocks, just so good. It's hard to run them, but like blocking hand and Narrow Escape, hybrid defense. There's no reason
Yeah.
why you'd never run hybrid defense, but.
Yeah,
Whichever,
that's
but-
an auto include.
But yeah, and that's the thing. I think, that's I guess we'll just kind of a little off topic at this point. But to get on, it's like the problem of like maybe a shell is that and I've been there too. It reinforces this idea that you have to always run certain cards, and then I guess that's where in terms of deck building you choose: do I pick the card that's good, or do I pick the card that's got more synergy for my playstyle or my deck? But it's got there's always the drawbacks. There's like I can pick a card that's always a 4 out of 5, or I can pick the card that is sometimes a 2 out of 5 if it's getting hit on my deck and I don't draw it, or I can pick the card or it's a 5 out of 5 if I draw it, or the matchup,
Mhm.
and that's where I think, I like shells. I do like shells. At the same time, like I'd like to just kind of. There's definitely cards that I really want to try to put in, but and I do experiment a fair amount, but at the end of the day, like there's definitely cards that I just feel like you can't not run. So
Well, there's also a lot of cards that you feel as an idea would work, but in reality they just don't.
yeah, I think any of those blue blocks like work with allies, bouncing them in out of play, those don't work very well. I wanted to use them in like Bobbity Mill. No, they don't. In like training, I've never gotten them to like work that well. For me, I always end up just going back to the blocks with endurance. Blue Brace is a card that I really hate. Like I hate that it's got no endurance, and it's so good. But damn, like like you get it, it's cool. But oh my god, it not having endurance just kills that card so much for me. And
Yeah, and
that's a card that I don't put in a shell right there because it's just so like. Sometimes it's really good, sometimes it's bad.
yeah, and it can be hard to make those choices or to think. And one of the things, and this is way back when Panini was still running the game, but we made a decision back then, like, hey, if we're going to be competitive with this game and we're going to try to do any events and things like, yeah, we can sub in a few cards here and there, but really, if we were to run into a future Gohan-esque situation where MP goes blank, or if we were to run into if we were playing oppressive and Majin Vegeta was, level 2 was out, like, could our deck still function? And really, that shell is what creates your stability or, like, consistency. And that's probably the best word for it. If we were to also compare this to other card games, like, I used to play Hearthstone a ton and get legend in that. And, in the end, it's like, if your deck can be more consistent, then you've passed a basic deck building checklist, you could say, is that consistency to pull off what you're thinking, regardless of what your opponent's going to do. So a lot of our shells are built towards that consistency and not necessarily saying in every Namekian deck you have to have hybrid defense. Like, obviously you would, but if we have a few options, maybe you go to 2 instead of 3, or that's just a vague example. Any deck with Pycon, it's like you have an Omni block as a name card, so you can kind of swap out parts of that shell and expand from there.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think the consistency is a good way to definitely explain shells. The shell, if you're gonna make a shell for a deck, it should be aimed at consistency, for sure.
Mhm.
Alrighty. Well, I definitely want to add more to that conversation. We're going on for a bit. I want to try to give more specific examples, and I'm like just drawing blanks right now for some of that. But I'm trying to I know I'm repeating myself a bit, but we'll move on to the next question though. We might come back to this a little bit more. But so Jeff, we'll start with you here. What kind of decks do you prefer to build? Is there a theme? Do you like, are you like an anger guy, you ball guy? I mean, you said okay, so you did say you like the Namekian, so we'll piggyback off that. What do you like to build?
That's a tricky question because I really enjoy playing card games in general, and at the moment, DBZ is the card game that I play. Again, I did not get into DBZ until Perfection was coming out. So before that, for 3 years, I was playing Hearthstone, and I was even in like the alpha test build for Hearthstone. And then before that, I was into Yu-Gi-Oh and Magic and all those other things. Then I was like, oh wait, there's a DBZ game that's like the one that came out in the 90s. I'm all in on that because I even still have the scorecards in a box.
Yeah.
And it's always been a goal of mine, and I can probably show this as we're recording. But I have a case over there that I bring to my play group, and we play about once a week. And I have at least 3 decks of every style. And from there, like that's always been my goal, is to run 3 decks of every style. Whether they have the same mastery, different mastery, depends on the set that's currently out and what ideas I have. But I can definitely tell you that I prefer anger just because I think it's fun to level up that way and then not have to worry about, like, if I unleash, my opponent unleashes, and then I go back down, and it's like, hey, well, now I got to build myself back up to whatever level I want to be at. Like, I prefer just a firm, nope, this is where I'm at, and this is where I'm staying. I've always preferred anger decks over auto level decks, but even I do recognize the strength that can come from auto leveling, and so I have to balance that. But my personal preference, if I could, I just have anger in all the decks.
Right, yeah, nothing wrong with that. No, leveling is definitely fun.
But Fanzy, if anything, has taught me, has come out with more anti-anger than anger gain. Unless you're orange, then you get all the anger you want for days.
I don't know. I don't know about now. I don't know about nowadays. I mean, orange has still got some pretty potent anger, but I suppose orange has everything, doesn't it? Okay, Joe, what about you, my man? What do you kind of gravitate towards when you're deck building?
My primary style is orange. I've always played orange when I played scores way back in the day. I only played orange decks. That's all I played. I think I played 1 red deck and I think 1 black deck the entire time I played scores. Every other deck I ever played was always orange. I am more of a slow kind of deck, or I am fast energy beats. Energy beats is what I really love. I really love energy beats. So obviously MPs that do really good in that, like Yamcha and stuff, I really gravitate towards. I don't like ball decks. My cousin that I used to play with all the time back in the Pansies days always played ball decks, always played Namekian. Or if he didn't play in the Namekian deck, he always played some kind of ball deck. So I played against ball decks the entire time while I played Pansy. I like slower control decks. So I really like black decks. Black decks are super, super fun for me. Usually if I make a black deck, I don't usually level. I usually try to pick an MP that can camp 1 or just kind of slowly get to 2 in black. Black, blue, and orange are probably the primary styles that I probably play. I play a little bit of red, but and the other styles are probably non-existent. I really don't play any Saiyan. I really don't play too much Namekian. Basically, everyone that I played with either played Namekian or Saiyan, so I played against them and helped build them their decks when I did it. So, I mean, I was kind of like a proxy. I helped build a lot of their decks, so I just never personally played them myself because I just didn't like the style of them. So
yeah, no, totally the same way for me. I got my buddy Derek that I live with. I got him into Knowledge Piccolo, and I never. Between giving him a lot of my cards early on to build that deck and then setting him up with that, it's like I tested against that deck like endlessly for the first like 4 or 5 sets of the game. Just all the time I was testing against Knowledge Piccolo, and so I never had much of a desire to make the deck myself. I think there's definitely decks like that more than that deck too, like that I tested against them and I understood how they worked. I just never was interested in them, so I totally get that part. Um, I've always been a big mid-range player, and I still kind of tie into that previous question in terms of like numbers. I always like if I run more than like 15 non-combats, I like 14 is like the sweet spot if I'm in terms of like a heavy non-combat to me. Like anything past that is just like I better be like loaded with combat ending if I'm gonna run that many nons. I hate drawing dead cards. If I'm a deck with any drawing, I hate running like 8 or more deads. Like
Yeah, I'm 100% the exact same way because I play a lot of drill decks and stuff. I do not understand the people that can run like 16, 18, 20 drills because that just get me nervous just thinking about it because I just don't want to go into a combat and have drills and not do anything and just lose. So
yeah,
so many. That is so many.
Yeah, no, it's yeah. No, I can't like I said, I don't feel safe running like even 10. 10 is like too many to me sometimes. So I'm just like always scared. And then another thing is to go back to the number thing, it's like I'm a big fan of omni blocks. I love omni blocks. I like cutting down on block space as much as possible, especially dedicated blocks. If I can run omnis, I'll run omnis all day.
yeah, I mean, I agree. I think omnis really help out because it gives you a little bit more versatility. Because if you come up against a straight energy deck, all your physical blocks are going to be wasted. If you come against a straight physical deck, all your energy blocks are going to be wasted. So at least the omni blocks will give you a choice of between the two, and then you can cut back on something to add something else more to your deck you wouldn't normally put in it and waste them on block.
Exactly. A lot of times I'll cut down from like I'll turn like 4 blocks. I'll take like 2 from each side, and then I'll turn it down into like 3 omnis. To me, that's just like just makes sense to me, I guess. But it depends on the deck too. But for the most part, I like omnis. So of course, Jeff of course likes anger. Joey's more of the control, slow guy. Going forward, I know Jeff was mentioning that he builds a lot of different kind of decks, and Joey, since I've made you go second like all day, I'm gonna ask you first for this one. What do you think you could work on with your deck building? If there was some, like,
I'm gonna go.
what is maybe like a weaker spot?
I tend to go kind of weird pathways into decks probably people don't normally build. So a lot of my decks either just end out not working or take a lot of testing to try to figure out a list of where the weak points are and fixing those weak points to actually make a decent deck out of them. Because a lot of my decks I feel are strong, but in order to get them to, like, I would say maybe like a competitive level of terms of deck, it takes a lot of playing to try to get the small weak points of the deck out and actually get it to a playable deck within a competitive environment.
So you mostly wish you could just playtest more, you think, and so that way you can kind of.
Yeah, playtesting a little bit more. I don't like playing one deck for too long unless it really fits my play style, because I just like doing different things. I get bored really easy playing one deck for too long. There's only been a handful of decks I can actually sit and actually play a long time with and be comfortable with it. Because otherwise, like I said, I just get really bored of playing the exact same type of deck. I like to mix it up and play a lot of different types of decks.
Gotcha. Jeff, what about you? What do you think you could work on for your deck building?
I think for our play group and as well as myself is and he hit the nail on the head, is time. It's play testing all of your ideas and just having that ability to do so. Again, I'm fortunate enough to live in an area where 3 out of the 4 weeks we meet up and play for 4 to 6 hours on Thursdays, and so it helps us greatly. And I think the results speak for themselves when it comes to the Utah group. Last year we had myself and Joe Lucian make Tournament of Power. He got first place at Grand Kai last year, and I got second place at West Kai. And then even this year, I got first place up at North Kai. And then Zach Johnson, one of the other players on our play group, he got second place at Grand Kai, almost got first. Oh, if you go back and watch that video, there's one key mistake he made that just blew him out of the spot. He could have done it. He could have done it.
It's on your stream, right?
Yeah, it's on my stream, and yeah, and then really we have found it to be that is some ideas we do with our deck building are really solid, and they're great decks, but we just don't have time to play test those little details. And even if you do have the time, if you're always going up against one person back and forth, you tend to learn the deck, you learn the changes they've made, and you know how to counter it. So it's not as fresh and rewarding, but it's always better to play it in person. Really the only person who plays Octagon out of our group is Joel. And he had to teach me how to use it for Tournament of Power. But even in the Tournament of Power, I noticed I was making mistakes because I wasn't able to physically see the cards and remember those interactions that I have made normally in my playtesting. And so I made some key mistakes and got out during the top 8 of Tournament of Power. I don't feel too bad because the guy who won the whole thing was, beat me. So I'm like, okay, I can give that. But it really is. That's the thing I wish I could do to improve my deck building, drawing it all back together, would be just to have more time. And then with that time, testing it against multiple other people. It always makes me a little sad when I hear play groups and it's like, oh, he's the TN player and he's the Piccolo player. And they only have their one deck, because that doesn't really help you prep for tournament. Because your deck may have a solid idea. It may be as good as it can, but it's not going to get those little refinements and deck techs that it needs to succeed in tournament. Frank, we talked about this earlier before we started recording, but it's those techs can make or break an event or a placement. Absolutely. Where and West Kai is the most perfect example. It happened a week ago. I scrubbed out super hard because I had a work tour the week previous. Flew back Thursday night to Utah. Then a bunch of people convinced me to go try to do the tournament. So I flew back Friday night, flew Saturday morning, got to the tournament, had jet lag, and I just made mistakes for days. Got a first round bye, so I was sitting there at the card tournament, and that's when the jet lag started hitting.
Oh no!
And I started to relax, and I'm like, I'm okay. And then I scrubbed hard.
So you gotta just drug yourself up at that point.
Yeah.
Oh,
and so, but the thing we noticed at West Kai was no one was running attach card hate. Not a single deck had attach card hate. There were 3 red decks. Not a single mule kick.
That's odd.
Deck list. Yeah, it's super odd.
Super odd. All those energy decks.
And so here comes Clench Nappa, which there are ways to make around Clench Nappa in energy decks or ball decks or whatever, but none of them are running attach card hate. So he would get Clench in, and it's not that he would win with here's a 40 life card, damage turn, combat over, I win. No, it was just here's 10 this combat, 12 this combat. Now here's my 20, and you're dead. But it's if that one deck tech that people forgot allowed that person and their deck, which did have text for other decks, like board clear for all orange and ally hate to get rid of, blocking allies. So he was ready, other people weren't. And
Exactly.
So
Yep.
he got the first. I would argue even at Grand Kai. Yeah. At Grand Kai, Oppressive Goku walked in, but we had, I know of at least two off the top of my head. There might have been a third, but Majin Vegeta. It's like Majin Vegeta against Oppressive Draku. Like straight up, get to 2, you're perfectly fine. But all the decks didn't tech for consistent ways to get up to 2. And so Oppressive Draku would just sit there, throttle Majin Vegeta on 1, and that was it.
They just yeah.
Or, it's one of those moments where it's like teching those little cards comes through playtesting. But that playtesting has to have time against multiple other decks to work. So I just wish I had more time to figure out those little deck techs. Because even with the deck that I won at North Kai, that Future Gohan, it's one of my favorite decks to play because it's a mix of anger and level hopping, kind of just like I'm doing my thing. Yeah. But no one else has really brought that to a tournament and had the same consistency that I've had, placing in the top 8. And then, but all the choices that I make during the game come down to how long I've just played that deck.
Yeah,
and that time. Because I've seen other people in our play group try to copy that same deck, be like, man, he got first, or he got second, or he got, in the top 8, got 4th or whatever. And then they try to play it. And it's those little decisions. The deck is right, but the teching of how you play the deck could be different per person. Because even in that deck list, I could think of 6 cards that someone else could swap in for other Namekian cards, and the deck would still function and do well. It's just a matter of preference and play style.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and definitely with the tech thing, I think, again, me and Jeff were talking a little bit before all this, but another thing we talked about is when you're deck building, choosing whether or not you're going to focus on the win con or go for tech. And how much you want to push your win con first. And I think what I was saying with Jeff is where we're at, in my opinion, is like it's better to just try to just go for your win con entirely, and then if you expect a certain matchup or two, then throw your tech in. But for the most part, blanket tech, like light tech. So I can understand why people didn't necessarily run attach card hate, but even then, like, God, not running Meal Kick when Unleashed is still around, and like people are running, if there are a lot of like the resourceful decks and the orange decks are running attach cards even now, so it's like that's
yeah. And the mistake I made with Rampaging Broly was like I took out my backbreakers. I was like, I didn't really need him at Grand Kai. I'll get rid of him for West Kai. And then it's like, oh, I don't have a way to spin Hercule's Belt. I don't have a way to spin Black Capture. If I would have gone against Clinch Nappa, yeah, maybe my leveling and my rejuve could have, equated to the stage damage I was taking. But either way, so much safer to have just that attack in the deck than not.
Yeah. No, yeah, definitely. I don't know. I think deck building is probably my favorite part about the game, though. I enjoy deck building more than actually playing the game, I think. Honestly. Not that I don't like to play the game, but I don't know. That's me, though. But anyway. Alright, so we're going to move on to the last question. Joey, of course, I'll give you the first go on this one, but
Sure.
what was a deck building win that you had, and what was a deck building fail? So was it like a time that you found a new combo that really worked out really well, or was maybe a time that like maybe a deck didn't work out when it looked really good on paper?
Okay, so my probably deck win was I played in the very first North Kai, but I didn't play in the actual tournament. I went up there with my cousin. My cousin played in the tournament. I did not feel comfortable with the deck that I had to play in the tournament, so I did not play. I played in the side events, but I didn't actually play in the main tournament. come to find out, I played in one of the side events. I got second in it, and my deck destroyed everyone else that I was playing against, besides the one person that I lost to at the end, which was Knowledge Piccolo. That was the only deck that I lost against.
What were you playing?
I was playing Orange Krillin.
I remember that deck back in like set 1 and 2. I was a strong deck. I ended up trying to foil it out in set 3, and then I just dropped the deck because I did terribly at it in a regional.
Yeah, it was a super strong deck, and I probably should have entered in North Kai and actually probably played, but I didn't. And probably my one fail that I probably had, I played at one of the ARGs. I think it was the last ARG that was in Illinois, I think it was, that I played. I played God Blue Protective Frieza in it. The very first match that I had was against my cousin that I went up there with. We play tested for 2 or 3 days right before the ARG. I beat him like 2 out of 3 times every single time we played. The one time I played against him at the ARG for the first event, I lost him. Then every deck that I played against that was a Namekian deck. And there was only like 3 or 4 Namekian decks there. I played against every single Namekian deck that was there. And the second match that I played was against Knowledge Piccolo, I think it was. And he had one combat where he got to 3, and then he just won the game on me, and that was it.
Yeah. Did you feel more like you could have done something differently deck building for all that? Like you could have thrown something in there, or
yeah,
did you just not predict field properly? You think?
No, I think it was just a bad lineup of people that I played, but
Yeah.
I also didn't have enough tech against balls. I think that was also another my problem with the deck, was I think I needed more things to deal with Dragon Balls at the time. But I didn't think Namekian was going to be that prevalent, or balls weren't going to be that prevalent there. So I just forgoed it and
paid the price.
Yeah, paid the price for it, basically.
Right on. Well, Jeff, of course, has already mentioned that he forgot, or rather, he chose not to put attach card hate. So, Jeff, you can use that one as your bad story if you want. But if you do have another one, by all means. But what's a good and a bad you had?
I've got my bad isn't so much one bad story as a consistent bad story, where my play group jokes that in Utah, if I play Broly, everything will go well for me. But if I take Broly outside of Utah, then he just like curses my soul, and I can never like do well in a tournament that I take him with. So it's like during Panini, and then like Empowered Broly was like a deck I loved playing. I just loved playing it. And here in Utah, it would test really well against all my friends and all the play group, and it'd be like, hey, I'm going to take this to a tournament. And then every time I took it, it would just be like just getting pounded into the face and being like, nope, the deck just would just fall apart. Made no sense at all.
Yeah.
So even this like past 2 Kais, it's like Grand Kai, top 8, faced a bad matchup. Okay, didn't make it to top 4. Fine, whatever. Go to West Kai, take Broly outside the state of Utah. Nah, just death. But I'd say a deck win. In our group, we tried for a very long time to try to make Resolute work, and we found that with Blue Resolute Mastery, like,
are you talking about this set right now, or when?
When it first came out, and then on pretty much all the way up until not this past set that came out, but Escalation.
Okay.
We were trying to figure out, how do we make this work? How is this any better than, a Ruthless deck or another Physical Beats deck? Saying Rampaging or Orange Adept. Like, what's the thing that could make this engine turn? And we found, like, through lots of playtesting, that Android 13 is actually one of our better candidates to make the deck work, because one of our deck wins, you could say, is figuring out that Blue Resolute on its own, not too great. The moment you can get even just a +2 modifier to your stages or life, then that deck, it can be devastating. And so I was figuring out, okay, if I can get Android 13 and get out 14 and 15 and 20, this now deck that was kind of average and meh is now doing really well and just pounding face. And then we tried the same idea, but with a different MP, and it would fall apart. Same deck, same cards, other than a few name cards swapped out. Didn't work. And then with Escalation, we're like, okay, Majin Vegeta, that level 2, it's got a modifier. Does it fit our requirements? And, I had some success or not. And then we built this weird ally build. It's not terribly consistent, but if you can get out Turles with Majin Vegeta and a few other Saiyans, then you have your plus modifiers, and then it would just wreck face.
Yeah, Alex Stewart has he has his build of Resource Majin Vegeta. When I saw it, I was like, what the fuck? There's like allies in it, there's drills in it, there's setups in it, and there's no prideful challenger. And I'm like, what the fuck is this deck? And then he went and like won an event with it. He top 2'd, I think, the event with it. So it's just like,
yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, it's stuff like that.
Our most recent deck win would be the revelation in our brains of like, okay, that mastery can work. Just needs a little bit extra to push it into win versus just slapping your face status.
I don't know. I've always thought Resolute's been pretty good. I mean, it was a hard switch for me to switch to Protective, from Protective to Resolute, because the way I played Protective was very defensive. But then switching to Resolute, like I think Resolute is probably the best if you're just gonna go really aggressive. Honestly, I don't think mid range does the best with that master. I think you just gotta. I shouldn't say mid range, but you gotta be like more aggressive of a deck. I think to really get the benefit out of that. So.
Yeah, sorry, resourceful mastery. I guess Resolute and resourceful. We tested both.
Okay, gotcha.
But definitely resourceful. If I misspoke earlier about Resolute, resourceful mastery. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Because it's resourceful mastery. That's where we realized, okay, it just needs a few extra stages, and then those physicals are hitting hard.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. That's the thing about resourceful is that that's why I think you have to like run. Yeah, you like have to run Unleashed in like a lot of those resourceful decks because you need a modifier, and the modifier is Treatment for a lot of those decks. You can of course run Biting Drill, but running drills in a resourceful deck starts to like really muddy it and muddy some of those draws, especially against aggro decks. So that's my opinion, at least. But
yeah, resourceful is kind of weird. To me, I think resourceful only works with a handful of MPs, and outside of those handful of MPs, resourceful doesn't go very well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way about that. You need a modifier really bad because you can throw a good amount of attacks out, but if you don't, they're all doing like 4 damage. They're doing like 4, 5, 6 stages of damage, and you're like, okay, no modifier on this. Okay, I don't do any damage. So, but yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think of something just to add to the conversation. I'm trying to think of something recently that I made that worked out really well, and I mean, Oppressive Goku I already knew was good. I mean, the Oppressive Droku I already knew was good, but then slapping that together, I did pretty good with it. That was really rewarding. That deck really came together really nicely after just a very, very little bit of testing. I kind of threw on it real quick. As far as fail goes. Orange Adaptive Goku. I expected that card to be a lot better now that you can run Unleashed, and then it just does not feel like it does enough. Like, it just does not feel so clunky and odd playing Adaptive Goku. Even with the 1 through 3. I've experimented to do that multiple times with the 1 through 3. What levels I want to run. I just cannot find something that is just like consistent and satisfying. I'm just constantly like, dang, this deck does just not do enough. 20 in Trunks just feels so much better than Goku.
That's actually weird because I actually have an adaptive Goku list myself, but I haven't play tested. I think I've played it once, so I haven't tested it enough. But I feel the same way about it, and that's why I built it, was because I thought it could be really good. But on my list, I think I run 1 and 2 of the Draku, and I run 3 and 4 of Droku.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I've messed around with which levels I run. I've tried all. I've tried like all Premier. I've tried a mix of Premier. I've tried like every level mix and matched in that deck. Other than like the level 4, I always consistently keep Drillku, and it just kind of never really formulates to something consistent. It always feels like I just get stuck down on those early levels too much, and I don't do anything. Even with all the auto levelers, there'll be games where I do fly off, but then it's like I always end up. It feels like I end up getting traded way too much damage, and I feel like if you're not capable of like blowing up with like an explosive combat, then you're just not really a good beats deck. You need to have like that sack potential, I think, and that's something I think you have to. That kind of goes all the way back to like the shells. Like you have to have like the shells and for beats, like you need to have those explosive cards that have become staple. Like some of the newer ones like Blue Tempo, you have to run that card because you don't do anything without it. A Blue Lunge, you need those cards, and so it doesn't give you a lot of flex room, and like the blue setups and stuff. Blue, and this just goes back to the conversation about blue just like not getting a whole lot, or just really niche stuff. But
Yeah, blue has gotten a lot of very weird, odd things that are good, but only for like a handful of MPs, and that's it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have found that Fanzy, like, and we had a previous conversation about this before the recording, but Frank and I were talking, and we're like, we don't think we could ever go back to Panini solely only cards, because Fanzy has come out with lots of variation and the ability to build so many different decks and use so many different MPs that you can almost use any MP that you want to and make it work in some way. But then, like we just talked about now, sometimes we have MPs and masteries and it's like it should work, but for whatever reason it just doesn't.
mm-hmm.
And that's one of those things where, again, it just takes time to figure that out and play testing to figure that out, where it's like, yeah, adaptive Draku should do really well, but even the adaptive Draku in our play group just doesn't cut it.
No,
it's not that the MP's bad, it's not that the mastery's bad, the deck lists is just the same as like a different version that can do really well. Like we coming up before Grand Kai, we were practicing and like one of our players had an adaptive Goku. We're like, okay, you've had mediocre performance with that. Let's just swap out the name cards with 18. Do the exact same thing. And for whatever reason, 18 just skyrockets in performance.
Yeah, no, 18... Entered 18 is just ridiculously good in orange. And yeah, you could run on very similar cards, maybe a few less drills, and when those auto lower space... Well, I don't know. I suppose it's built... I think the build actually changes quite a bit. But yeah, for the most part, like a lot of the core you can keep it. Yeah, 18 is just so much better, I think, than Goku.
And I agree. Like there are a lot of cards that you'd swap in and out, but just in that testing of changing just the MP with mastery combo, for whatever reason, just worked comparatively to others. And I guess a question that's not on here is just the idea that I'd like to pass on to Retro, that it's like, you may have a great idea. You may have a great thing that works on paper, and it may work one or two times, but never stop yourself from experimenting more. If you like really want a deck to work, great, but sometimes that idea just isn't going to work, so don't be afraid to experiment. And one of the phrases we have is in our deck building is like, well, can X MP do it better than what has been found to be successful? Like if I want to build a knowledge, whatever it may be, can Kami do it better than Piccolo? Or can Piccolo do better than Gohan? Or if I'm building an adept deck, can it do better than Goten at whatever, physical beats and getting drills out? So it's just one of those things where sometimes a combination works really well. Other times, not so much.
Yeah.
Even though it should on paper.
Yeah.
Well,
No,
Well, do you feel that some MPs, when you are switching them out, it might not be per se one MP might do one deck a little bit better on something, but do you feel switching out an MP in one win condition works better in a different win condition, but it's still a decent deck because it does a different win condition a little bit better than the other one?
well, decent, but what he's getting at is like ultimately, if you're looking in the sense to build a good deck, like if you're trying to find something good, you know, it's one thing if you want to play a deck purely for fun because X person's my favorite character, X thing is my favorite style, whatever. But if you're trying to find something that's good, and if another MP does it better, then that's where you have to experiment. That's where you have to try weird, wacky cards. And that's, I think, those are those kind of times where that's where you're putting cards in for synergy, and that's when you really got to break apart from that shell that you have. You got to go put cards for synergy. And you got to go cards that are just so off the wall kind of things sometimes.
I think with the current state of the game, you can get a lot of decks up to through the refinement process we've talked about. I think you can get a lot of decks up to a tier 2 level. Get it really close where it's a good deck, but then sometimes, and again I'll use that Goku and 18 example, new card comes out, then it just makes it so you could have roughly the same shell, but then just swapping that MP changes that tier 2 deck into just tier 1.
Mm-hmm.
And it's finding that right combination of things to work. So I think very much there are players out there where it's like they can make a very good, solid, consistent, tournament-ready deck, and it'll do well. But the difference between doing well and doing great can be one card, again, running attach card hate at a tournament, or it could be that switch of the MP or switch of the mastery where you get just that little more consistency going. And it's not necessarily that your win condition changed. It's not necessarily that the deck itself is bad. It's just that little bit of edging to make you slightly better every time you build the deck. And sometimes it's not necessarily the deck that needs work. It's your combination of mastery MP.
I definitely agree with that. Yeah, I don't know. I think in terms of deck building though, we're in like the best spot we've ever been in. I think, like you said, Jeff, I think there's so many decks that I think are really good, and I would put them on the tier 2. And the stuff that I would put on tier 1 is the stuff that I think is consistently always going to be in a top cut. And I think right now that's Supreme Kai, and I would argue Madara Vegeta is going to make it up there because of popularity. But I think Supreme Kai is right now the only one that I consistently expect to always see in a top cut, like a top 4.
Yeah, and
as long as somebody's playing it, like that deck's gonna always do good.
And deck building wise, I think it's hard to tell in the game right now because we just have so few players, and arguably events. More reasons to gather together and to try out these different decks and ideas. It's like, I think the game itself has a wide variety, but we're only giving ourselves a small glimpse based on a few people and a few events.
I think so. I think another thing is there's a good portion of us that are very active that are definitely testing a lot and trying a lot of that stuff, but most people, like back to what you and Joey both said. You both said about how you wish you had more time to play, to test. It's like I just think for most people that don't have a lot of time, if they want to try to win, like seriously, they're not going to play a deck with an new MP that they haven't put a lot of games on. You know, so. But yeah, I think I would agree that we do see a small glimpse of what's good though. Because think about all the times that like you see like a one of deck like maybe win event or top, you know, like random deck, like Kid Trunk Suppressive or Wheelo, or just Clench Nappa. You know, like nobody was really gonna say those decks were like tournament winning, and then they go win tournaments. or they top, like. So I don't know.
Yeah. If I were to like make a list of what I would consider tier one, I think definitely oppressive Goku, just because of card advantage. Just being able to do that skip and do weird shenanigans. You can build that deck in various different ways. Maj and Vegeta, if you can create the consistency in the deck. Again, watching it in person at the past two Kais, there are three Kais. It's been people not having the time to practice to get that consistency in their strategy. But I think it's a serious contender. I think a black or red version of Majin Buu, just because we found that man, his brackets get hurt.
If you can't drop his AT, he's an E and F on like his top 5.
Yeah, seriously.
On like everything.
So if you can make the right version and have a good consistency with black mischievous Boo, or even like again Zach Johnson's Grand Kai that got second place, I argue should have gone first, but maybe I'm biased. Like that version of Boo Ball is so devastating, and he's been practicing that deck for a long time, so he has those little techs in it. I would argue is Future Gohan my favorite deck so far. The past two Kais I tried Burly.
Yeah, no, he's still good. He's still good. Finding the right home for him, for me. I think the only thing I think he's competitive in at this point is knowledge right now.
Yeah.
Maybe protective, but
yeah. And then I would put Deborah on there. I don't think blue Deborah can necessarily
I
think it's
a trap.
And black, even with the nerf to punt, the mischievous mastery can help make up for a lot of actions and building the deck, because black still does have good strong sword cards. But ruthless for sure. Like ruthless Deborah.
You think ruthless? Really? I think ruthless Deborah is like my least favorite of those three.
I personally lean towards black, but
I think black's the best.
We have a few players. They've refined their red ruthless, and it is brutal.
There's definitely a lot of drill grab in red for freestyle drills, which is really nice to help you consistently see that aggressive sword drill, which is cool.
Yeah, so if people are looking for a deck archetype,
you'd say those are all tier. You think those are all tier 1? Like they're all gonna win it? You think they're? So I mean, I want to say they're like all tier 1, but I feel like there's other stuff too that I would maybe throw up there too with that. Like I think there's just so much stuff on that. Like I would argue Android 18.
Yeah.
Orange I would throw in there. I think that's more consistent than red. I would throw in there. Maybe even Orange Krillin up there too. And Yamcha.
Well, I definitely think that there are some decks within the exact same ballpark that can easily just upset some of those tier 1, just because the way the playstyle is of certain decks, that they can get off kilter really super fast if they come up against a certain deck type.
Well, that's what. Yeah, I mean, ideally that's what it. Yeah, I mean, those are like the counter decks. I mean, I would still put those on like tier. I'm just like, for me personally, I do feel like there is a tier 1, and for my tier 1 is just like only like a single deck or two right now, in my opinion. But like you said, I agree that all those decks you mentioned are very strong for sure.
Yeah, and I think there's a few decks that are up and coming. Again, 18 being one we've talked about a lot, but I don't think we've been long enough in the current set to really get a sense of what in that area maybe tier 1 just yet. So I think Rampaging Broly has a great chance if you aren't jet lagged and super tired.
Yeah.
And Adaptive 18, like super strong, just that life card +1/+1/+1/+1 everywhere can add up super quick.
Oh man, when she's got like +5 on the board and it's like turn 2 and you're just like, I can't.
and every energy she throws is just free.
Free energy, and everyone's coming at like for like 8 or more, 8, 9, 10 life, every one of them. You're just like, what the fuck? And then you get like a disc unstoppable for like 12 life. And you're like, where did this come from?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I think there's still room, given the new stuff, to really expand and continue on. But again, I think if we were to make a list of our top 8, it would be just the ones we've talked about right now that have proven to be consistent among all the events.
Yeah, I think Majin Buu was really underestimated. I think a lot of people thought he was going to be crap, but he's really not so bad. I think he actually does have it's mostly like as long as you don't just get bodied in the beginning, you get stuck on level 1. Like if you get stuck on 1, you're fucked. But like if you don't get bodied right away with him, like he's got a lot of longevity on that level 2 and 3.
Mm-hmm.
I've pulled a lot of games back from being on even just level 2, taking stage damage, rejuvenating 1 every time I take some stage damage.
Yeah, I definitely think Boo has something that to really go on this. I just think, yeah, his trap being stuck on 1 is basically the bane of his existence. Kind of like in the earlier levels of like Frieza. That's what the problem with Frieza was. You get stuck on 1 and you basically don't do anything. So.
Mm-hmm. And again, another prime example, Majin Vegeta. Like, should be doing well, but anytime he just gets stuck on 1, you're going to have a bad game.
I think he just gets outbeaten by other beat stacks. He's just a techie beats, and so he'll lose in a very beady environment. Or in an environment where his level 2 effect constant doesn't matter. Or he doesn't matter. Like, he's not any better than the other beats options. He's worse, arguably, because he doesn't have... I feel like he's got a good AT, but I feel like there's people that just outstage beat him, like Broly, in an ideal just beat matchup. But
Yeah, he's not fast enough. He's not aggressive enough. He's a slower version of Beats.
well, I don't think he's slow. I think you can still bum rush with him. He's just not like...
Well, I think he's slower than some of the other aggressive MPs.
Yeah. I just think he just doesn't win trade in a beats versus beats. I don't think he wins the trade, but he wins. I think he's just going to be forever relevant because Supreme Kai, honestly, and that's the truth. That's how I feel, I guess. But I'm just on I've played so much with these last few sets on Octagon, and that's just like my conclusion, and in tournaments too. But that's just kind of the conclusion I've come to right now. But I think there are a lot of decks to look out for, though. Either way, I think everything, like I said, repeating myself, but again, everything that I think Jeff has mentioned very much is something that I think everyone should try to build. And I do like the thing what Jeff said is don't be afraid to experiment. There's always something, and if an MP maybe does something better, and you're trying to make it competitive, then start throwing some weird changes to it. Or maybe you need to change up the MP, and maybe you'll find something really good there.
Yeah, I have like 70 decks on Octagon, and I probably only played like 10 or 12 of them. So testing is kind of a thing that I lack. So
yeah, for sure.
I brought this over. I'll show you guys.
Oh, I got a question if I want
here's
to.
Here's a little case where I have all those different decks in. It's like that's literally what I take every time I go and play test.
Someone's gonna think you have a gun in that thing.
That or he's a high-class gambler. Or high-class gambler. Joey, you had a question, man.
Yeah. Since we got talking about MPs and stuff like that, is there an MP that you think that currently isn't being played very heavily that should be more played? That you think is really strong that's not currently heavily as played as much as it probably should be?
No, Cell gets played a lot. God, I think we'll probably cut off the video right here, actually. I don't know as much as maybe people want to hear the answer to that, but of course, we talked about the deck building stuff. But, or maybe we won't. I'll try to answer that real quick. Jeff, if you got an answer, we'll finish with this, and then we'll cut off the video here. We can talk a little bit more, but...
if I were to give a quick answer, I would say Pycon. And I think people underestimate his ability, and you can make a deck camp 1, or you can make it level. Like, I think he's super strong, has great AT brackets for anti-physical beats, but people haven't... Again, it's that combination of mastery and MP that people just haven't matched yet.
Jeff, I like you. because that's 100% my answer.
Hey.
You know, I think PyCon's definitely pretty good for sure. I would agree with you guys. If I have to cop out here, I think because of just how few people we have there. If you look at any of these tournaments, there is a crap load of variance in what people are playing,
Hmm.
and I think PyCon's probably the best answer I could give would be PyCon too. I think PyCon's pretty damn good. I just don't. Every people will ask me, where do you go with him? Well, how do you build him? What do you think? And I'm like, I don't really know, honestly.
The most successful version we've had yet so far has been, it would have been a year ago by now, literally a year ago. The last West Kai, there was an orange. Oh, I forget the mastery,
Adept.
but yeah, I think it was an orange adept PyCon. Um, but I think that's so far been the strongest contender. They got
I mean,
third, I believe, third or fourth.
Kelly Dennis won an event with Mistress PyCon. I know people like that one, and I know Protective PyCon is another one. So Mischievous, I think Mischievous and Protective are the ones I think people probably try the most. I've seen people do Amplified too. I've seen like those, and then I've seen Combative. Those are probably the four I've seen the most of. If for one for each style that I've seen the most of. But the Adept one was really. I remember looking at the Adept one, the list, and I was like, wow, this is really odd. Why you would choose Adept, but. I don't know. Well, anyway, we're going to end the video on that, everybody. It's been a long one here, but if you tuned in for the whole thing, thanks. But anyway, I'd like to thank Jeff and Joe for hanging out, talking about Z. I'm low-key pretty tired, but because I've had a long couple days, but it was good to get you guys on. Like I said, it sucks that I lost that other episode, but it's nice that I got Jeff on finally. I've been trying to set something up with him for like a month now. But he's been avoiding me. Just kidding. I've been avoiding him. But anyway, I'd like to say thanks again. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it. It's just nice to talk about this game with some people.
Yep, it was very fun.
Yeah.
Enjoyed it very much.
Alrighty, guys. So
Indeed.
anyway, this is Deck Daddies number 2. Take it easy, guys. Peace. Yep. Oh, whoops.